This is Join Us in France, episode 389. 389. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France. Everyday life in France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel to France. Today, I bring you a conversation with Sarala Terpstra about how to enjoy classic French food when you're vegan. We've both written cookbooks about French food, so we geek out about making great French food and how to make it with a vegan twist. Get ready for some inspiration for your own meals at home. This podcast is supported by donors and listeners who buy my tours and services or my cookbook, Join Us at the Table, including my itinerary consult service and my GPS self-guided tours of Paris on the Voice Map app. You can browse all of that at Annie's Boutique, joinusinfrance.com/boutique. And Randall wrote a very nice review of my GPS self-guided tour of Paris. He said, "We had a quick stay in Paris before a longer visit to the southwest. One of the things that defined our 2 days in Paris were Annie's voice map walking tours. We've both been to Paris before, and we love to walk and explore. I can safely say that Annie's tours make for a richer, even more enjoyable experience. Annie touches on the big and the small, the quirky and the substantive, all rolled together in a thoughtful narrative that provides both definition and flexibility. If you want to know about cool little shops as well as grand churches, these tours are for you. We've been on many tours throughout the world, and I can say with confidence that these were some of the best we've ever done. Get the most of your valuable time in Paris. Join Annie for one or more of her voice map tours." Thank you so much, Randall. I do work hard on those tours, and it's wonderful to hear that so many people enjoy them. Bonjour, Sarla, and welcome back to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. Thank you for having me again.
It's lovely to talk to you. Today, our topic is entirely different. We're talking about vegan French cooking. And I think it's going to be very interesting to anybody who's trying to either eat vegan all the time or trying to reduce their consumption of protein, animal protein, because there are a lot of things that you can make that are very French and that you can make vegan. So let's talk about that. First of all, how long have you been vegan?
About 2.5 years.
Okay. Was it a difficult transition, or what led you in that direction?
I have to say it wasn't too difficult. I always thought it would be, but my mom is from India. So as you may know, many Indians are vegetarian and a lot of Indian food is vegetarian.
Yes.
But my mom is not vegetarian. We were not raised vegetarian, but we were raised eating pretty much mostly vegan because my mom tried to make even Indian food much healthier. She was very health focused, so she wouldn't use the traditional butters and creams that are used in Indian cooking.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very normal for us to have vegetables be the main course. So I feel like when I did eventually switch to vegan, it actually wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Having grown up with that has kind of guided me with thinking creatively with substituting for vegan French cooking.
Yes. Oh, and vegan Indian food is just amazing. I mean, like
Yeah.
unbelievable. Like the
All the
flavors.
spices.
Yes. The flavors of the spices, it's unbelievable. So I'm not sure French cooking has that much of a palette when it comes to flavors. Indian vegan cooking is where it's at, in my opinion. Yeah. But maybe you can convince me otherwise. I'm happy to be shown that I can do better because I have cooked a fair bit vegan, not all the time, but, I'm a part-time vegan.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. So I do enjoy the challenge. And you wrote a cookbook about this, and I have browsed it, and it's very interesting. So we want to talk about your cookbook. I wrote one as well. Yours is exclusively vegan. Mine is more like for omnivores. So my idea was, what if you want to cook French, but somebody in your family is vegan? How do you adapt these classic French dishes to be vegan. But you've done a fair bit of that too, so it's going to be fun discussing some
Yes.
recipes. Yeah. All right. So what is it like eating vegan in France? Let's start with that, because that's something a lot of people probably wonder about.
I was honestly really nervous about it before we moved here because we've been living in France for 4.5 months. And the last time we had visited France, we weren't vegan, and we just loved like gorging at the restaurants, just eating these long, French meals and stuff. So I wasn't sure, but I've been pleasantly surprised. I'm not sure if France has changed. You would know more than me, but I have found that people tend to be decently open-minded about it. If you're at a restaurant and you tell them, I haven't had anyone lecture me about it or anything like that.
Good.
Usually they just tell you if they have an option, or if they don't, they just say, no, sorry, we don't.
Right. So have you been in places where you're like, well, you just can't eat here because we don't have anything that we could make vegan?
Yes, that has happened quite a few times where we walked into a restaurant and asked them, and they're just like, oh, no, sorry, we don't. Because I understand in France, and one nice thing about their restaurant is that the menu is small and thoughtfully made. And, it's not this giant menu like
Right.
it often is in the States.
Right.
So what they have is what they have. So it doesn't always work that way. But I've also been pleasantly surprised by some of the traditional restaurants that will randomly either have a vegan option, or if you ask them, say, oh, okay, well, I guess, yeah, we could do something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I found that the higher the price point, the more likely they are to accommodate you.
that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. Also, for people who want to eat kind of cheap, most inexpensive restaurants in France, you can always find kebab places. And they
That's true.
often have falafel, which, as far as I know, is always vegan. I don't know.
Yes, we have fallen back on that a few times when we were desperate and hungry.
Yeah.
Like we were, out running errands or on a trip, and okay, there's a kebab place. Let's just ask them not to put any yogurt or anything like that on it.
Right.
So yeah, that works. And also pizza places, surprisingly, either will have a vegan option, or you can just ask. They almost always have a vegetarian pizza
Yeah.
at the pizza places. So you can just ask for that without cheese.
Yeah. It's not delicious, though. I mean,
Yes, it's just there to fill the need.
yes. It's just when you're hungry. And yes.
Yes.
But we hope to do a little better than just fill the need. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some of the dishes that you develop in your cookbook that are classic French, or things that are kind of tangentially French that you can make vegan. What are some of the recipes in your cookbook?
For my cookbook, the focus I was going with was classics, because I'm not French, and so I don't have the layers of knowledge that you may have with, all the variations on French dishes and the regional areas. I really just wanted to start out with the famous ones, that people around the world really love, the beloved, famous French dishes, maybe the cliche ones, if you want to call it that. But I wanted to do it with a whole food approach, though, because that is the way I cook personally. Sometimes I do treat myself to vegan meat substitutes and vegan cheese substitutes, but for the most part, I really like the challenge and enjoy the health benefits of eating whole food plant-based. So, for example, I have the mushroom bourguignon in my cookbook, and instead of beef, obviously mushroom. I did cauliflower au vin instead of coq au vin, so I had some fun with it. Yeah. So I did a quiche where I used chickpea flour and polenta instead of eggs.
Wow, that's creative.
Yes, it was a lot of fun.
Yes, because I had scratched my head like, how would you make quiche work?
Yeah,
So-
it doesn't, and none of them turn out, they don't taste or look exactly like the real deal. But to me, the way I like to think of vegan French cooking is like conceptual. The
Uh-huh.
concepts of French cooking applied to plants.
Right. Now, there are some French dishes, classic French dishes, that are vegan to begin with, like ratatouille, for example. Lovely French dish that you can do. I mean, it is vegan no matter what you do.
Yeah.
The French onion soup, the way French people eat it, we don't actually eat it with a ton of cheese. So it's Americans that load up the cheese. And restaurants that serve it to visitors often load up the cheese these days. But when I was growing up, onion soup was bread and soup. And so it had no milk products,
That's interesting because, I also have onion soup in my cookbook, and I think it's just delicious the way it is. So
Yes, you don't need.
that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't need the cheese, really. I mean, if you love the strings of cheese, then have it. But I don't feel like it's necessary. I like it just as much without the cheese. Let's see, what else? Oh, la pissaladière. That's like a pizza, but it's with melted, kind of
Caramelized onions.
caramelized, right? Caramelized onions, and it's a onion reduction. So in the classic one, you put anchovy, but
Mhm.
no cheese. So if you remove the anchovies, it's vegan.
Yes, and it's very good.
And it's
I've actually
delicious.
tried making it with little eggplant slices instead of anchovy for fun, but I actually think it is just good with the onion.
Oh, yes,
So,
yes. What else? I must be missing some that are just already vegan.
well, the weather's getting warmer, so we just enjoyed our first sorbet at a restaurant the other night, and the server said it is vegan because I think nowadays maybe sometimes sorbets aren't vegan with gelatin or something,
Ah,
but I think traditionally they are, aren't they?
maybe that is not something I've ever looked into.
I think it's sugar and fruit and water usually,
Yeah,
from what
yeah,
I've read.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then there you go. That's
Mhm.
another vegan French classic as well. I mean, it's not just French. Sorbets, every country does this. So let me
Yes.
see. I need to look at my cookbook and see what I have done because I haven't. Oh, bechamel, which goes with a lot of French dishes, can be made vegan if you
Hmm.
make it with broth, with a vegetable broth instead of milk, or you
Hmm.
could make it with a soy milk or something like that. I have not
Hmm.
tried. I've tried it with vegetable broth and it's good. It thickens just fine. It's a good way to do it. Blanquette de veau, you could do with, let's see, what was the name of the substitute? I actually went to the store. This is one where I bought a substitute, like a meat product.
Was it a seitan? I
Is
think I
what it
remember
was.
seeing that in your cookbook.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
it was seitan, and it was really good. As we say in French, c'était bluffant. It was really good. Then the other thing that is very good that we forgot to mention is the galette, obviously.
Yes.
Galette, the buckwheat galette, you can make with all sorts of vegetable toppings. It doesn't need to include cheese or meat.
Yes,
Gratin,
and it's healthy too. I love the galette, the buckwheat crepes, or even just for dinner sometimes for a light dinner because
yes.
they're hearty and they're filling. But yeah, like you said, you can put any topping on them. I like avocado on them too sometimes instead of cheese.
Nice. Very
Mhm.
nice. So, have you had galettes at restaurants in France where you ask them to
No,
make them vegan? Okay.
that I haven't had luck with yet. Although I've seen that in places like Paris or I think even Rennes, I saw a vegan restaurant that actually makes a vegan batter. But it seems like every restaurant I've looked at here actually puts eggs and milk and stuff in the batter and butter.
What?
So
No, 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 no,
yeah,
no. Buckwheat galette is buckwheat and water and salt. The end.
really.
You don't need anything
Okay.
else. It's just the toppings could be meat or cheese, but you don't have to. You could use, sliced mushrooms. You could use any vegetable you want. Yeah, buckwheat crepes have no eggs. Not the
You've
way I make
inspired
them.
me.
The way I make
I
them,
think
no eggs.
I'm going to check next time I go out, like I see a restaurant that has them and actually ask them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's just water and buckwheat and salt. That's it. Then pan con tomate, but that's Spanish, but it's
Hmm.
really good. Poulet basquez, you could make vegan because you could just use a substitute
Hmm.
for like a seitan or something. Salade juive is a classic vegan dish that my mom made all the time. So it can be called chuchuka or chachuka or something like that, but it's peppers and tomatoes and garlic.
Oh,
Yeah.
and what is that a regional dish in France or is that all over?
So it's all over the Middle East. And my mom grew up in Algeria, so she made it all
Oh,
the time. It's grilled peppers with tomatoes, kind of stewed tomato. But I have the recipe in my cookbook. If you haven't tried it, it's one of the
I'm
most
gonna check
delicious
it out.
things.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, it is wonderful. It's really wonderful. Soup au pistou is also vegan because that has lots of vegetables and beans.
Hmm.
Now, some people put pork in it, but honestly, it's worse with the pork in it, I think.
Yeah, it's very good on its own.
Yeah, I prefer it
Yeah.
without the pork. So there you go. And then tiens de légumes, of course, how could I forget tiens de légumes? So I have to make the distinction between tiens and ratatouille because Americans get this wrong a lot, and that's because of just sloppy recipe writing that we find online.
And maybe the Pixar movie too.
Could be, could be. So the ratatouille is a wet, very, very cooked dish. It looks like a stew. But tian is exactly the same vegetables, but they are kind of arranged in a oven dish. And I do put a little bit of tomato sauce at the bottom so that it will get soft enough. But it's not soupy. It's not, it's something that kind of holds its shape, is what I'm saying. But it is the same ingredient.
Yeah, and ratatouille is more like a chunky, kind of rough stew, isn't it?
Yes, ratatouille is a rough stew, but it's otherwise the same vegetables. It's really good. So tell us, what are the mains that you have in your cook? I'm looking.
Well, I do have ratatouille on there. I did have a galette where I used, instead of ham and egg and cheese, I did like a smoked tofu with a sweet potato instead of egg. And and let me think what else.
You have an artichoke sandwich. That sounds good.
Oh, yeah. And that I don't think that that's traditionally French, but it was actually based on the tuna sandwich in French that I had in the past in France that had the nice olives and like tuna salad on it. And I love the texture of the artichokes when you squeeze them and wring all the water out. Canned artichokes is what I use. They get this nice kind of flaky, thick texture that does really well with vegan mayonnaise or homemade vegan sauce. So the texture was really nice. But then when I actually put it on the sandwich, I loved that it tasted like artichoke at the end. So that was a fun one where you take the concept of a French dish, but then it creates something new with a new flavor. And I love when that happens too.
Yeah. Then you have beet tartar. So that's like sliced cooked beets. Is that what it is?
Yeah, sliced beets. And then I threw some avocado and the dressing in there just to give it a little bit more bulk and some more flavor too.
All right, this one I want to hear about. Cassoulet, so a vegan cassoulet. How did you do that?
Well, it doesn't have meat in it.
I suppose, yes.
Yeah, probably sacrilege. I just used big chunks of mushrooms, which are one of the best meat substitutes, as I'm sure you know. And I browned them and, pan fried them until they were really rich, some different seasonings. And then instead of baking the mushrooms with the beans in the oven, it just kind of gets too dry with all the animal fat in there. I just top them, put them on the beans right at the end and don't really bake it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very nice. That sounds, so in the end, it's a beans and mushroom casserole is what.
Yeah, it's more, it kind of reminded me as an American of baked beans, but with the more French flavor. So it's something that, if I hadn't tried French cooking, I wouldn't have tried something like that. Baked beans with these brown mushrooms on top. But, it inspired me to try it. And I really like the flavors of it.
Yeah, sounds good. What about cauliflower au vin? So that's coq au vin inspired. So how do you do that?
Well, one thing I liked about that is that I got to try the flambe. So, where you pour the brandy or the alcohol into the pan and brown it. And Annie, I should ask you, because you're French, is that something people actually do in their homes, or is that only a restaurant thing?
As far as I'm concerned, it's a restaurant thing, but there are probably French homes where they do it, just not mine. Not where I grew up, but not in my house.
Yeah, we definitely never did it in my house.
Yeah, I never make coq au vin anyways.
Is coq au vin still a popular dish in France, or is it more of a vintage dish?
It's kind of vintage by now, because it would be really hard to find a coq instead of a chicken at a store. You used to be able to buy coq, which was cheaper than chicken. You'd on pouvait acheter un coq ou un poulet. And maybe there are still some butchers that make the distinction, but if you wanted to make coq au vin today, you would just buy a chicken. And the idea was to use the inexpensive, because the coq lives much longer than the chickens. So it's a tougher meat. Usually it's a little smaller than the hens that are raised for meat. And so it's a smaller animal and tougher. So that's why it got cooked so long in wine.
Yeah. And it seems like what I've been learning, which I think is so interesting about French food, is a lot of the famous classic dishes were actually ways to be resourceful.
Sure.
like making rooster soft or eating snails, the stereotype of eating snails, I think was also a resourceful thing.
Yeah. The snail is perfect. It doesn't run away.
Yeah.
It's like easy target. Poor snails.
Yeah.
I don't eat.
And most French people I've talked to don't eat snails.
That's right.
I think it seems like a lot of our stereotypes of French cuisine, at least from an Anglophone perspective, come from Julia Child, which is maybe why that vintage French recipes still live on.
That could be. I mean, she did wonderful stuff, but if you still go by her recipes, she overcomplicates stuff for no reason that I can think of. But
Makes me happy to hear you say that. Because I tried using her cookbook as an inspiration when I first started, and then I would look at French recipes written by French people, and it was 10 times simpler.
right. I mean, we don't have all day. French moms who, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it's typically more often than not, it's the mom that cooks. And she has a lot of things going on, and she cannot spend 5 hours in the kitchen preparing dinner. It's not going to happen. Even on Sunday, we don't. French women want to go on a long walk on a Sunday or on a bike ride or a jog or something. They don't want to be behind the stove all day. So it's changed a lot. So if you're going to a professional restaurant with people who are paid to make this food, then they will take the time it takes. But at home, we don't do that.
Yeah.
So.
And I find French home cooking, from what I have experienced, wonderfully simple. And as for me being raised on Indian food, more is always better, with our spices. So my Indian mother was the one who would spend 2 hours cooking a meal, and it was delicious. And it was always add more vegetables, more spices. So I've had to change my way of thinking with French cooking. But a good learning process for me that just let the ingredients speak for themselves sometimes.
Yeah, the French food is kind of plain from the perspective of an Indian chef. They would be like, what? That has no flavor. This is like horrible. It has no flavor and no spice and Well,
I do find when I read French recipes, I'm like, only 1 clove of garlic?
Yeah.
I'm going to use 4.
You're entitled. You can do what you want. It's your recipe. You can do what you want.
Yes, I'm already breaking the rules, so.
So how do you do fondue savoyard without cheese?
Yeah, that one took quite a while to get the texture to a cheesy texture. I used cashews as the base with that. And then it's something really cool when you're like stirring it with tapioca starch on the stove for long enough. You just keep stirring and stirring and stirring. It actually starts to get stringy and take on a cheesy texture. And then I used, do you know nutritional yeast?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very popular in France, actually. All the yeast. So that gives a nice cheese flavor. So I use that to flavor it.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Then the next one is gratin dauphinois, which I have to say, thank you for not sticking cheese in your gratin dauphinois, because that is not right. There is no cheese in gratin dauphinois. The typical French recipe is just potatoes and, there is cream, but no cheese. So what do you do instead of the cream?
I just used oat milk and then cauliflower. I blended cauliflower into the oat milk to make it a little thicker. But I watched a French cooking show where I watched them not use any cheese. And to me, as an American growing up with these cheesy, we call it potatoes au gratin. I'm sure you have had it.
Yes, yes.
It's very cheesy. I was like, wait, there's no cheese. So that was eye-opening to me too. But it's good just with the milk.
Yes. You don't need the cheese in that. And very good. You have spinach souffle. So this is a souffle without eggs?
Now, this is a very loose interpretation of souffle because I almost gave up on that recipe. I think there were some tears involved with that one because souffle is egg, and recreating that protein in the souffle that gets it to rise up and puff up. So finally, I did come up with using tofu and chickpea flour, I believe is what I used. I don't remember the exact ingredients, but it's kind of fluffy and spongy like the original souffle, but it doesn't deflate like the real souffle would.
Very nice, very nice. For the exact ingredients, they're just going to have to get the book, okay? That's just how it works. If you want to make it, you're going to have to get the book into that. Tomate farci. Okay, so tomate farci in France is with pork, but you probably did mushrooms.
Yes, I think I did mushrooms and quinoa.
That would be good.
Yeah. Because sometimes just mushrooms can be a little watery when you use it. For something like tomate farci, I found I needed something
to hold it together,
to dry it out a little.
Yes. And then you have tomato tart, which is a favorite of mine. Now I'm going to look at your recipe you put in it.
Uh-oh.
Because Okay. It's pretty
Okay, I
much the
passed the
same.
test.
Yeah. So the pastry crust, I don't make my own pastry crust. I'm a terrible French person, I guess. I just buy it because it's so good and so cheap.
In France, you don't need to make it. They have such a good variety of store-bought pastry crust here.
Yeah, including vegan ones. Unless it says au pur beurre or au beurre, huh? Then there's no butter in it, and then it's vegan. So there you go.
Yeah.
So you do tomatoes and Dijon, and which is what I do, and it's so good. That is
It is.
that's such a good recipe, and it takes hardly any time, and you can just stick it in the oven. You know, it's good for an appetizer as well.
Easy summer dinner. I like that one.
Yeah. All right, let's keep the best for last. You have desserts. Tell me about your dessert.
The desserts I find shockingly are usually easier than the main French cooking because sweet food is just good, you know? So
True.
it's not too hard, like where you were saying, like getting the flavors right, you know, with vegan French cooking where it's a little more simple with ingredients. With sweet food, I've found with making dessert, it's sugar, so it's going to taste good no matter what you do. I think one thing that was a little bit of a struggle for me was the clafoutis. Because mine still, I think, cracks a little bit. Getting a vegan clafoutis that has that kind of eggy custard texture. But the flavor was good in the end.
That's good. And you go after the flavor really more than the appearance, I think. You know, there are some very fancy chefs that are trying to reproduce French cheeses using vegetable ingredients. But that would take a lot of practice and a lot of tries, and you just
that's
have
a
to
science.
Yeah, that's a science. So you need to buy those. I mean, I can't imagine making camembert. There's even chefs that make something like foie gras, but it's vegan.
Yeah, I've just tried the store-bought from the stores in France that have the vegan products. The foie gras was very good. And I even had a vegan blue cheese, which was amazing. I was shocked.
So where'd you find those?
Not at small BO stores, but the big BO stores tend to carry these kind of famous French brands. One brand I really like that's French is called J and Joy Market, and they're based in Paris. And they've been doing those kind of scientific vegan cheeses, and it's really good. Yeah.
Wow, I'm going to have to try that.
J and Joy Market.
Okay.
But their vegan products are some of the best I've ever had. And the vegan cheese I've had in France has been better than any of the vegan cheese I had in the States, which in a way makes sense. You know, this is the cheese special here. So.
Yeah, they have to try a little harder because we actually eat a lot of cheese here. And French people are not shy to tell you it's crap.
They're going to be more critical.
Yeah, so if they think it's crap, they're going to tell you it's crap.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. We don't sugarcoat it so much.
Well, it makes the food taste good. That's for sure.
I suppose. So tell me, some nice vegan kind of meals you like to put together, maybe with a French bend. What would you do?
Well, actually, today we had a nice lunch. I needed to clean out my fridge, and I had endives, a whole bag of them, and they were going brown. And I had some leeks that were also going brown. So I did the braised endives, which I've been slowly working on. I think that's a skill that I'm working on to get just the right flavor because they have that bitter flavor, but I'm working again to the point where the bitterness is good.
Yes. It's the end of endive season. It's a winter kind of vegetable. And so they are getting bitter. I had some endives last night as well. And I thought, stop buying those.
I did not know that they got more bitter towards the end of the season. That's good to know.
They do, yeah.
But then I also I seen a recipe in a French magazine for leeks and chicken, which looked really good. And I had my leeks to use up. So I did that. But of course, I used my cauliflower instead of the chicken. I just browned it and then put it in with the leeks. And I did oat milk instead of cream. And it was simple and very good.
There's a recipe called fondue de poireaux that you classically make with butter, but you could make it with a vegetable spread. And you just slice the poireaux, the leeks, very kind of in a food processor. So they are evenly sliced and very thin. You need plenty of fat, whatever fat you use. And then very slowly they will cook. And I usually add a little bit of broth just so they cook down. It has to cook down for a good hour. And it's just very delicious. Even people who don't really like vegetables will eat that very gladly. And by people who don't like vegetables, I mean my husband. Well,
I haven't met a leek dish that I don't like, and I was not raised on leeks at all. And I really never cooked them until I started cooking French food.
Uh-huh.
So I think they're absolutely delicious. I don't know why we don't eat them more in the States. They're
Mm.
so good. And just plain, just even just boiled.
So I like to boil
Yeah.
them, cool them, and then just put a little bit of vinaigrette on top. It's
Mhm.
so good. It's a really nice appetizer. They're delicious. Another thing that I've liked a lot is cauliflower florets with a little bit of spray olive oil on top and a little bit of whatever spice you like. I happen to like. It's an American. It's kind of a similar thing like a steak.
Oh, is it like lemon pepper?
It's not a lemon pepper. There's one that's called steak seasoning or something, steakhouse seasoning or something of the sort.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and it's very good. And of course, obviously, there's no meat in the seasoning. You can just do that on top of your cauliflower florets in the air fryer for 10 minutes, and then I poke them to see if they're done. And it's really good. Really good.
Sounds, yeah. I don't have an air fryer, but I do think I need to get one from what I've heard.
You don't need to do it in the air fryer. You could do it in the regular convection oven because an air fryer is nothing but a convection oven. It's just that it's just two of us now, and I don't like to turn on the big oven unless I'm cooking for more people. So for just the two of us, I just use the air fryer. And it cooks faster in an air fryer because the cavity is so much smaller.
Yeah.
The air doesn't have anywhere to go, whereas in a big oven, you're heating this big cavity and you're using a lot more energy. And if you only have a little bit of food in the center, it takes longer. So yeah, they have a lot of advantages, but honestly, it's just a convection oven is what it is.
Good. Well, I can still try it then.
Yes, you can try stuff like that. Or even in a barbecue. You could make that in a barbecue if you have one.
Oh, yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. So, or it would be really good with chipotle seasoning.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
that's a little spicy. So just a little sprayed oil, chipotle seasoning, cauliflower in the oven. Good.
One of our favorites, it's not French at all, but being Americans, we used to love wings, buffalo wings.
Yeah.
So we do cauliflower wings with the buffalo sauce. And it kind of hits the spot.
That's good. I've never thought of doing so. Buffalo sauce. What's in buffalo sauce? Is it like a fat with spices?
Yeah, I think it's usually made, Frank's Red Hot sauce.
Yes.
It's that mixed with butter. But, we do olive oil. Although I haven't found Frank's in France, so we haven't had it since we moved here.
Yeah, we have lots of hot sauces.
Any
hot sauce would work, I think. I mean, I have some of Frank's that I brought back from the US, and it never goes bad, that thing. I don't know what's in it. It's like
that's
Crisco.
true.
It's
Too
like,
much vinegar in it.
yeah, it's like Crisco. It never dies.
Yeah.
But I keep sniffing it. I'm like, is this still safe to
No, still
eat?
good.
Yeah, no, we're good. You can put some in the dish. So how do you cook the cauliflower when you make it for wings?
I think we would do it in the oven. Like I said, it's been a few months since we did it. We did it back in the States, but I think we roasted the cauliflower in the oven first to get it nice and crispy, and then tossed it in the sauce maybe while in the oven. It always is good to finish it off with some fresh sauce right at the end too.
Yeah.
Especially with the vegan wings.
Yeah.
I think that's how we did it. And then we would make like a vegan ranch dipping with vegan meat.
You have some really good ideas. So everybody out there, just because you're in France doesn't mean that you can't eat vegan. Or if you're visiting France and you would like to eat vegan, there's probably some. How do you find vegan restaurants in France for when you can't make food at home?
Well, I was just in Montpellier yesterday, and they have several fully vegan restaurants there, probably at least 4. It seems like the bigger cities are pretty easy to find vegan restaurants now. The only downside is if you're on vacation in France, there's a good chance you want French food. And I haven't found hardly any traditional French restaurants that are vegan. So it's going to be more curries and bowls and wraps and smoothies, things like that at most of the vegan restaurants in France. But it's good if you need that.
But if you go to starred restaurants or even the Michelin bib restaurants where you'll pay 70, 80 and up per person without the wine, those typically have a vegan option, okay? It's just a inexpensive French fare where it's hard to find something.
Yeah.
But if you're willing to pay, and if you're willing, like when I do itinerary reviews with people, I always send them a list of restaurants and I visit their websites, and most of these restaurants, even if they never used to, by now they have vegan. They have a vegan option. They often don't have several.
Good to know.
But they have one. Now, of course, if you are the sort of vegan who can't eat next to somebody who's eating meat, then that wouldn't work. But I haven't met very many vegan
No.
eaters who cared that much. I mean, most of them, because if you care that much, you really need to do everything at home.
I think that most people who are traveling are probably used to eating in different circumstances.
Yeah.
Vegans who are traveling.
Now, breads obviously are all vegan.
Yes, thankfully, baguette is vegan.
Fries are vegan, obviously,
Yeah.
There's always something you can eat, but it would be better if you planned. I think that's the trick, is when you're vegan, you need to plan on
You do, yeah.
where you're going to eat and which apps do you use in France to find vegan restaurants?
I really only use Google Maps because I love that it has the most recent reviews. Because oftentimes if you use there is a vegan app called, is it called Holy Cow?
Happy Cow.
Happy Cow. See, even you know it. Wow.
Yes.
I should know that.
I've used it. It's good.
But it sometimes has outdated information on it. And
Yeah.
what I like about Google is because it sucks when you plan a restaurant and you go and it's closed,
Yes.
especially after the pandemic. So
Yes.
many things have closed. But
Yes.
Google, usually you can see that someone was there 2 days ago and the most updated hours and stuff are on there. But even then, I've still had it sometimes where we planned quite a few times to go to a vegan restaurant. On Google, it said they were open, everything. We got there and they do the fermeture exceptionnelle, like a random closing. Is that what it is?
Yeah. That's like, oh, I decided I'm not working today. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So in that case, the best thing we could do is just, okay, where's the nearest Asian restaurant? That's where we're going to find vegan options. So.
Do Indian restaurants in France usually have good vegan options?
Yes, yeah. Asian or Indian or even Middle Eastern. Yeah. Any of those would be good options, usually.
Sounds good. Okay. So tell us the name of your cookbook. Tell us where people can find it and all of that good stuff.
Sure. My cookbook is Vegan French Favorites, 30 Beloved French Recipes Reimagined. And it's exactly what it sounds like in the book. I also, in the book, have a little guide in the beginning about ingredients for substitutions and where to find them. And you can get my cookbook on my website or on Amazon. That's saralaterpstra.com. I also recently just started recorded cooking classes for more in-depth kind of technical things for learning stuff like that. So that will also be on my website. And I'm on Instagram too, at Sarala Terpstra.
And I don't go to Instagram very much, but the stuff of yours I've seen is lovely. And you have a lot of very good ideas. Wonderful. I have to ask you, because you just moved to Béziers. How do you like Béziers then?
I'm not sure how French people feel about it, but for us as Americans, we're like, this is amazing because it's really old. So it has very much a faded kind of grandeur to it. Like the buildings are really old. So we see history everywhere. And one thing I do like about it is since we don't have a car, like we were just in Montpellier yesterday and it takes much longer to get around the city. They have a very convenient tram, but in Béziers, it's just big enough that it has everything for us, but it's small enough that we can walk anywhere from our apartment. So it is very convenient for where we're at right now.
Right. So when we last talked a few months ago, well, no, maybe it was 2 months ago, you were still in the process of trying to open a bank account and you were still thinking about switching your tourist visa to a regular visa. Have you made progress on any of those?
Not really, because so yesterday, the reason we were in Montpellier was for an appointment to get our titre de séjour. That will finally be able to lead to us getting a bank account because then we can show the proof that we have a legal right to be here. That was supposed to happen within 3 months of us being here, but I think it just got pushed back because of the pandemic because they didn't call us in until 4.5 months in. So now that's done, it's finished, we got that. So now we can actually go and try to get our bank account and then hopefully in the future, if we look for an apartment, it will be easier.
Oh, yes. So now you have a titre de séjour.
Yeah.
And is that for a year?
It's for the remainder of our time here, which we got here in November. So up until the end of October. And then we have to renew. We have the right to renew it, to a request for a renew. So we can do that 2 months out from the deadline, the expiration.
Right. Yeah, they don't want you to apply for that now.
No.
Yeah, too early. No. All right. Well, that's seems to be progressing slowly but surely, as things do in France. This is normal for anybody listening. This is normal.
It's all worth it.
Right. We don't do anything very fast here. So, but I'm glad you're enjoying Béziers. I think it's a lovely city. it has a reputation of being very right-wing and all of that.
Yes, we've heard that.
But if you can ignore politics, you'll be fine.
And we can because we don't speak the language very well, so we don't really know what's going on. We get handed flyers all the time, and there's like little protests and stuff, but we're ignorance is bliss. We're just happy to be in France.
And you haven't seen any, I mean, I'm just asking this because I know you're of Indian origin. You haven't had any discrimination based on that?
No, and I actually am surprised that Béziers is so far right-wing because there's a huge immigrant population here. Mm-hmm. Huge. It's actually one of the most diverse French cities I've seen. So I think it was a little ironic, but
yeah.
No, everyone actually here is very nice because it's a smaller city and they're not as used to tourists. Generally, people will not switch to English with me, which I really appreciate. They just keep speaking French to me. And they're usually very curious and strike up a conversation about what I'm doing here. And they want to, tell me about all the stuff to do in Béziers and stuff. So
that's good.
I appreciate that.
That's good. And plus, you have an adorable little daughter, so she probably breaks up the ice really nicely. Kids are great for that. And many other things as well, obviously. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Sarala. It was lovely talking to you again. And I recommend your book. You've sent me a copy. It's lovely. It's well done.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think people who want to cook vegan, whether they are doing it in France or in America, would enjoy getting some inspiration from that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup et au revoir.
Au revoir.
Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so, and you can see them at patreon.com/join us. Patreon, join us, no spaces or dashes. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you have been with me for a long time. Thank you so very much. And a shout out this week to one new patron. Woohoo! No, but I'm grateful for her. Isabel Brones is the new patron. Thank you so much for becoming a patron and making this podcast possible. This week, Elise came over to record an episode and we got chatting about our summer plans. So we thought, let's record this and share it with our patrons. Elise also has a patron page and it's patreon.com/EliseArt. ELYSART. That's hers. So we recorded our chit-chat and she's going to share it with her patrons. I'll share it with my patrons. And it's a wonderful way for you to get a peek behind the scenes. And PayPal donors and episode guests that have an account on addictedtofrance.com can also watch this video if they go to addictedtofrance.com. If you're preparing a trip to France and listening to as many episodes as you can to get ready, keep listening. It's a great way to do it. I do recommend that you search the website to find relevant episodes because, the show titles are too short and the episodes are very long, and we mention a lot of great resources all throughout the episodes. Of course, you can also hire me to be our itinerary consultant. You purchase the service on joinusinfrance.com/boutique. You tell me about your dream trip to France, and I get to work on all the things that you need to know to have a great trip to France. I send you a document and we also talk about it on the phone for about an hour, and it's really fun. My time is booked up until the last week of June, but if your trip isn't right away, I'd love to talk to you about it. But if you cannot talk to me because I'm all booked up, you can still take me in your pocket by getting my GPS self-guided tours on the VoiceMap app. I've produced 5 tours and they are designed to show you around different iconic neighborhoods of Paris. In the tour, I tell you about all the things around you, the museums, the churches, the famous spots, the cafes, the restaurants, the people who made this area so iconic. If you walk one of my tours without stopping, it'll take you 60 to 90 minutes. But if you stop at all the cool places that I recommend, it'll take you most of the day. So you're in charge of the schedule. You can do it quick, you can do it slow, but it's a great way to enjoy a neighborhood. And these tours are also really cost effective. If you buy them directly from me on the boutique, you get a nice discount because we bypass the 30% royalty that normally goes to the App Store. So there's no excuse. You will have a wonderful time in Paris. I guarantee it. Take a look at joinusinfrance.com/boutique. If you enjoyed this episode, you might also want to listen to episode 311 about easy French recipes you can make at home, where I talk about all the recipes that I included in my cookbook. Join us at the table. For the French tip of the week, I want to answer something that came up in the Facebook group. Marianne asked, after one says bonjour in a store, how do you say I'm just looking? I have a heavy southern accent and don't speak any French, she says, so it needs to be as simple as possible. That's a very good question, Marianne. 2 people answered, and as often happens on Facebook, one was right and the other was not. Here's how it goes. You go into a small store and you say bonjour, and then the salesperson asks if they can help you. You should answer, je regarde, or je regarde, merci. This means I'm just looking. The wrong answer was je cherche, because that means I'm searching. And if you say to a clerk that you're searching, even in America, they'd say, what are you searching for? Let me help you, right? And the point is, no, I don't want help. I want to just look. So you just say, je regarde, merci. This week in French news, well, last week I told you that French political parties were reorganizing around coalitions and that they think they can help them win more seats in parliament. This is also a time when political parties change names, which is why French politics can be a little bit hard to follow. Last month, Emmanuel Macron ran for re-election as the head of a party called La République En Marche, also known as LREM. When he ran 5 years ago, his party was called En Marche, or EM. And the fact that EM are also his initials was a little, strange. Perhaps a whiff of self-importance. But of course, somebody who runs for president is, full of themselves. Like, this is true in every country. But they changed it. Now, Emmanuel Macron's party is going to be called Renaissance, so rebirth. And the coalition he formed with other political parties is called Ensemble, together. Left-wing parties are also reorganizing and changing names. We have La Nouvelle Union Populaire Écologique et Sociale, also known as NUPES, N-U-P-E-S. It's a ridiculous name if you ask me. Marine Le Pen is not making alliances with anyone because, that's not how she rolls. And that's also why she'll probably get very few seats in parliament. She had only 12 the last few years. She took 2 weeks off after losing the election. And, that doesn't show a lot of dedication, but she's probably right. No matter what she does, she's probably not going to have that many seats in parliament. Maybe 25 seats, out of 577. So the prospects are not good. Last week, Emmanuel Macron started his second and last term officially. There was a small ceremony at the Élysée Palace. It was on TV, but it was a much smaller affair than the start of his first term, obviously. They fired the cannons 21 times at Les Invalides. They had a few receptions, but it was kind of low-key. French presidents do not take an oath. Instead, the president of our Constitutional Council, and his name is Laurent Fabius, who served as the prime minister under François Mitterrand, so he's a socialist. Laurent Fabius stood in front of the president and announced the exact number of votes that Macron got. Then they shook hands and it's done. That's it. This is done in front of a few hundred guests that had gotten an invitation from the president. And this time he invited politicians and officials as well as their families. So there were a lot of kids in the audience, which was a little bit unusual. For a brief travel update, the Clooney Museum reopened this week and they're now done with 10 years of renovations. Most of that time, the museum was partially open, but now it's fully open and they won't be doing anything to it for a long time. I heard an interview with a lady who runs the museum, and she explained what they were trying to do with these renovations. They needed to make the Clooney more accessible, both in terms of physical accessibility. They added lots of elevators and completely modified the entrance, but especially in terms of making the collections more approachable intellectually. The Clooney is fascinating because it is a museum dedicated to the Middle Ages, but it's also a major Roman site. They used to sort exhibits by themes. I can't remember what the themes were, but it made no sense. Now you can see everything in chronological order from oldest to newest. So you start with the Roman baths and then you move on to the Middle Ages. Then they display the giant heads that came down from the row of kings on Notre Dame. And that's late 1200s. And then you end with the Lady and the Unicorn, because that tapestry is from the 1500s. I cannot wait to see it again. It's such a wonderful museum, but it's going to be busy for the next few months, so I recommend you book your tickets in advance. Starting next Monday, so tomorrow, if you listen to this show as soon as it comes out, the masks are not going to be mandatory in public transportation anymore in France. So that means not mandatory in the metro, not in the taxi, not anywhere. So for flights, it's a EU directive that just said we're dropping mask mandates on flights starting on Monday. So really, the last place where you have to put a mask on in France is if you do anything medical. Even my veterinarian requires masks. So, you do have to have a mask in your bag, but they're not, mandatory in very many places anymore. And of course, the health minister said, well, it's not mandatory, but we recommend that you wear a mask in the metro. The truth is they were not enforcing these rules very well because people have had it. And so why have rules when you don't enforce them? It doesn't seem to make any sense. And I'm certain that if a variant raises its ugly head, we'll go back to more restrictions. But for the time being, that's where we are. Very few masks anywhere. I still wear a mask in some places. It's just if I feel like it. That's how it works. For my personal update this week, it's been a busy week for me again. I recorded 2 trip reviews and 1 episode with Elise. I also did itinerary reviews every day. I squeezed in a couple more because they are going so soon. I also visited the lovely town of Lautrec in the Tarn. I ate garlic soup for the first time and I was surprised by how good it is. I lined up an episode about it with a special guest, and you'll hear about that in probably by September. And this weekend, I plan to make confit d'ail. Confit d'ail is when you cook garlic very slowly, low heat, in olive oil. And then when it's all nice and cooked and mushy, you squish it all and you use it as a paste. So either as a base for pizza or on crackers. It's absolutely fabulous. So I bought the garlic now. I just need to sit there and peel all of it and make it. And this week, I also need to plant my tomatoes because it's getting hot. It's time to plant the tomatoes. So I'm always too busy. I haven't been bored in a long time. I guess that's good. Show notes and full transcript for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/389, the numeral. And remember, if you have friends visiting France soon, help them plan their visit and tell them about the podcast. Next week on the podcast, an episode about the pilgrimage of Compostelle with Elise. Such a fascinating tradition that still goes on today. And I know many of you listening have walked some or all of it, and many of you are thinking about it. So it's a fascinating topic. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2022 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.